race for the 1st Congressional District is heating up between Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace and Democrat Michael B. Moore. Today, I talk one-on-one with Michael for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Michael B. Moore, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much. Always great to be with you, Quintin.
Well, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you're a businessman, a husband, a father, the founding CEO of the International African American Museum, and now a Democrat running for the 1st Congressional District. Can I just jump into some big news right now? Because obviously, as you know, congressional leaders just yesterday announced an agreement on a short-term spending bill that will fund the federal agency for about 3 months. And obviously, that averts a possible partial government shutdown when the new budget begins October 1st, and pushing final decisions until after the November election, of course. Temporary spending bills generally fund agencies at current levels, but an additional $233 million was included to bolster the Secret Service after the 2 assassination attempts against Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, and additional money was added to the aid with the presidential transition, among other things. In a letter to Republican colleagues, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said the budget measure would be, quote, very narrow, bare bones, unquote, and include, quote, only the extensions that are absolutely necessary, unquote. Meanwhile, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats would evaluate the bill in its entirety before this week's vote, but with the agreement, quote, Congress is now a bipartisan path to avoid a government shutdown that will hurt everyday Americans, unquote. Let me ask you this, Michael. Do you believe members of Congress will actually add more junk to this particular bill to it before December 15th and actually pass it before the winter break?
Well, let me just say, I don't think that the annual budget is an appropriate place to play politics and to, holding the government hostage effectively is the wrong strategy. And look, they've called this the do nothing Congress. They've not been productive. They've not, done much of anything. And there are people whose livelihoods, people who work for the government, who are, need to get paid. People need to get their Social Security, their Medicare, all those things. So I think, trying to come together in a bipartisan way is the only way to do this. And I am hopeful that Speaker Johnson can figure this out. I just think that there are, unfortunately, there are factions on the right, particularly the MAGA right, that are more interested in being disruptive than in legislating and in managing the government. And I think we've got to, try to get through that. There are people who need the government to work and to work for them. And, I think this is the budget is the most critical and the most basic way expression of that.
Well, let me ask you this. What is disruptive with the Republicans as far as this particular bill is concerned?
Well, I'm not sure about the particulars of this bill. I know that in general, we shouldn't have to go to, a stopgap kind of a short-term bill on this. We need to come together. We need to negotiate a budget for next year, and we need to vote on it, and we need to pass it. So all of these maneuvers, which are much more frequent in most recent years, they're relatively rare in the broad history of government. We've been able to pass budgets historically. And so I think there is a measure of disruption and people holding Congress and holding the government hostage effectively for whatever particular interest they may have. And I just don't think that that's right. I don't think that's in the interest of the people.
So what are the interests for the Republicans and what are the interests for Democrats?
You'll have to ask them. I mean, one could say that the MAGA agenda is to, in fact, be disruptive. There are lots of people on that side who don't, even though they're in the government, they don't necessarily believe in the aims and goals of government. And so they are trying to disrupt. I don't think that's a particularly, sort of contentious way of thinking about it. I think people on the left, people, Democrats, are trying to run the government. They're trying to legislate. They're trying to, move the country forward.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. How should Republicans and Democrats move this country forward?
In my judgment, the legislature, Congress, is the largest deliberative body in the world. I think people who are among the 435 members of Congress need to come together. The whole point of Congress is to bring points of view and perspectives from all around the country, to negotiate, to collaborate, and to figure out solutions that are in the best interest of the American people.
So, from your first congressional district perspective, and if you were in Congress today, what ideas would you negotiate right now with Republicans and Democrats to get something passed?
I think you've got to negotiate. I think you just got to have an overall orientation that you are going to negotiate. You're going to sit down on the table and negotiate with everyone. I tell people all the time, I can work with anyone. I've lived and worked and succeeded in environments where, with all kinds of folks, you chronicled the work that we did with the International African American Museum. Joe Riley and I went to Columbia and worked with an overwhelmingly Republican General Assembly to get that institution funded and to get it built. There was a spirit, even though there were some hurdles and it was hard work, but we got that done, reaching across the aisle to create what is now one of the more important public institutions in the region. So I think just instead of planting ideological flags in the ground and refusing to budge from those, I think people in Congress need to come together with the spirit of negotiation, with the spirit that we're going to keep the American people, front and center, and we're going to move forward.
What ideas would you negotiate right now?
Well, like I said, everything. I think everything needs to be a negotiation. That's like saying, if we were coaching football, how do you score a touchdown? Well, you've got to move the ball down the field. Sometimes you run, sometimes you pass. The objective is to score a touchdown. The objective of Congress is to pass legislation. In my view, the federal budget is the foundational piece of legislation that needs to be passed, and people need to come together to do that. So negotiation is just a way of getting things done. You've got to, negotiate with people on the other side, with people who think differently. That's the whole point.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. If there is a government shutdown, will the debt just keep going up?
Well, the debt goes up or down based on the priorities that the Congress votes on and supports. And that, in my view, holding the government hostage for the debt is just an inappropriate. Those two things, if you have issues, if a representative has issues with various bills and the spending, getting on the floor and negotiating those bills at the appropriate time, that's what Congress is there for. After the fact, after those bills have been passed, then holding the Congress accountable for the bills that have already been passed in some kind of a way is just nonsensical in my view.
So let me ask you this. What type of spending should be happening right now in regards to this bill?
Well, look, I think there are enormous, the overall priorities of the federal budget. There is discretionary spending. There is, those things that are mandatory. Among the mandatory things, is things like Social Security and Medicare and the like, paying the interest on the debt. It is a little bit odd, but in the discretionary piece of the budget, military spending, the defense budget is a part of that, and all of the other various bills that are in there. So the process, I think, is there. The process is right. It's just a matter of people coming to the table with, in my view, the right orientation about moving forward and not playing politics with this, budget vote.
What orientation should take place right now in your mind?
You keep asking me, I think, different versions of the same question. I think people need to come together with a spirit that we are we hold the Congress and the Congress responsibilities high, and it is our responsibility. I'm speaking now as if I were voting now, and that we have to, move this budget process forward in a way that keeps the government going, and that allows for the hard and good work of the federal government to proceed.
Well, let me ask you this. I want to reread what this article is about, coming from the AP, but it basically says, congressional leaders announced an agreement Sunday on a short-term spending bill that would fund federal agencies for about 3 months, averting a possible partial government shutdown when the new budget begins on October 1st, pushing final decisions until after the November election. What final decision should be pushed right now?
None. They need to vote on the budget. They need to not kick the can for 3 months. They need to vote on the budget, pass the bill for next year, and move on, in my judgment. I think it's pretty simple.
What should be in the budget right now in your mind?
I think you've asked me that already. I mean, I think all of the things that are in the budget should be in the budget at the time when various components of the budget are being negotiated, which is not now. Then you need to negotiate those. If you want to negotiate the defense budget at the time that the defense budget is up for consideration, then negotiate that. Talk about that. Talk about the priorities. Talk about the needs of the country. Talk about, spending. We could use some spending to come down to the low country. One of the things that I discovered over the last couple of weeks is that there are 3,143 counties in the United States. And of course, there are 435 congressional districts. The county and the congressional district that are projected to suffer worst under climate change, to have the greatest damage under climate change, is Beaufort County, South Carolina, and the 1st Congressional District of South Carolina. So we got to get serious about this. I know you asked me specifically what we should fund. We need to fund climate efforts. We need to continue to support things in the Inflation Reduction Act that was the single greatest investment in climate in history. We need to really get serious about the environment. I've got 4 sons. I've got an amazing 1-year-old granddaughter. I have concern about the low country that they will live in because, we aren't being as serious as we could be about this issue. My opponent in this race has been labeled by one of the more preeminent sort of environmental watchdogs. She's been labeled as a climate denier. That's not what this district needs. We need serious leadership focused on trying to solve the solutions, the issues that people have in this district. Another piece of legislation that if I were, at this point, putting legislation on the docket, we need to codify Roe versus Wade. It is unconscionable to me that women don't have the right to make decisions about their own bodies, about their own health care. In January of this year, I saw a statistic that said that of those states that outlawed abortion, there were 64,000 pregnancies that resulted from rape or incest that were forced to continue. In my view, that's unconscionable. That's inhuman. That's medieval. We need to restore women's reproductive freedom, and there are a whole host of other things. I think we need to do things to support and protect and preserve Social Security and Medicare. This is a program that people have paid into since their first job when they're 14, 15, 16 years old. We cannot pull the rug out from underneath seniors about Social Security. We need to fund on a local basis. We need to fund public schools. So there's a lot of different priorities.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm running out of time. But why isn't your newly declared support for reinstating Roe versus Wade not on your website?
It is. It absolutely is. It's been since day one. I've talked about women's reproductive freedom. It's the first issue that I talk about every time I'm out, and it is absolutely there.
Well, people in the state I talk to ask if a woman is forced to have a baby by the South Carolina legislator and dies in childbirth, should the state should the state actually compensate her family for the value of life?
Well, look, I think fundamentally, if men were being forced by the government to have vasectomies for whatever reason, I think we would have an uproar in this country, the likes of which we've never seen. I do not believe that the government has any sort of appropriate role to get in between a woman and her physician around, this very sensitive matters of her health care and her body. And so I would just say, women deserve that right. They deserve a right that they had, up until the last few years, for the last 50 years.
But should the state of South Carolina compensate her family for the value of her life?
Look, I think there's a lot of things that should happen. I don't think we should get to the point where a woman, we're contemplating a woman dying in childbirth, and I would prefer to deal with the situation that would bring about that death as opposed to dealing with what happens after that. I think we need to, reinstate Roe. We need to return those rights to women, and I just want to focus on the core problem and not a derivative problem.
But should they be compensated? Should they receive money from the state of South Carolina?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I'd have to see it. It certainly seems wrong to me that, but it seems wrong to me that a woman would lose her life following the law. But the law is as it is, and we need to change the law. That's the point. I believe the law, as it's currently stated, around 6-week abortion ban, I think that's unconscionable. That's wrong. It's immoral in my view, and so that's what I'm focused on.
Should lawmakers consider punishing abusers with involuntary vaccinities instead of punishing victims with involuntary pregnancies?
It's an interesting idea. I think we need to appropriately. I mean, there are some instances where sex crime abusers are, chemically castrated in certain states. You have to look at that and see. I'm not sure the particulars of when and why and how those decisions are made, but yeah, we need to be very firm in making sure that women are protected. We need to support the Violence Against Women Act, which endeavors to continue to protect women. And we need to, again, we need to give women the right to make decisions about their own body.
So, as far as protecting these women and obviously punishing these, the criminals, should they be chemically castrated here in South Carolina?
Look, I don't know. I think I'd have to look at it. I'd have to look at precedent. I'd have to look at, context to be able to make a definitive decision about that. Rapists need to be, disciplined. They need to be in prison. They need to, understand that there is an enormous, cost for engaging in that kind of behavior. Women need to be protected.
If they want to reverse the vaccinacy, should they actually alert local authorities, Michael?
I don't think offered an opinion, sort of on the vasectomy question. I think somebody can be raped. Someone can rape another person and even have a vasectomy. And so I don't know that one getting a vasectomy solves the problem. I'm not sure about that, but I think let's talk about it and let's figure it out. But again, I think let's protect women. Let's figure out ways to ensure that they feel safe, and let's move forward. Let me just tell you, sort of to end this part of your question, women have come out all across the district in support of our campaign because we are so steadfast in our support of women. We've got an event tonight down in Hilton Head, a Women for More group. Each time we have these events all throughout the district, hundreds of women come out, and they understand that we are the only candidate in this race who really consistently supports women, and so that's why they're backing us.
Let me go back to that last question. If abortion is legal here in the state of South Carolina, Why does anybody have to be informed?
Uh, can you ask that again? I'm not sure I understand your question.
Yes, sir. When I went, let's go back to the last question. If women want to reverse their vaccinity, should they alert the local authorities? Now I'm asking, if abortion is legal, why does anybody have to be informed about that?
It's not legal beyond 6 weeks. There's a 6 week abortion ban, and the reality is that most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks, and the procedures that are in place to get a abortion, oftentimes you've got to go and get an ultrasound, or you've got to have multiple appointments before you can actually have the procedure. It is designed to make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for women to have that procedure. So I'm not sure what you mean about informed. It's effectively outlawed in this state as it is right now.
Should the physician name the victim and provide victim's health and personal information then to local authorities?
I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure I understand the question with respect. Ask that again, please.
Yeah, should a physician name the victim and provide victim's health and personal information to local
Well,
authorities?
that's not the physician's responsibility. That's law enforcement's responsibility. I mean, I think obviously, if a woman suffers from rape or other sort of sexual abuse, hopefully they will quickly engage and get the help they need, the medical help. But hopefully also they will engage with the law enforcement community, and that process will sort of go down its path.
And one last question on this, Michael. When should a woman go to local authorities? Just after rape or incest?
Both are crimes, and so in the same way that if someone robbed a bank or committed any other crime, the crime needs to be reported, and women need to get the care that they need to move forward.
Now, I want to go back to, obviously, because you talked a lot about obviously your leadership skills, and I know on X you said this: leadership should prioritize you and your family over party politics and division. As a results-driven businessman, I'm committed to working for the people of SCO1 and no one else. So let me ask you this: results-driven businessman, can you actually elaborate on that?
Uh, there's an institution in Charleston called the International African American Museum. I had a hand in leading the fundraising and the development of the museum experience there, and so that's an example of offering leadership to an organization. I was CEO of a company, Glory Foods, that we moved from Columbus, Ohio, to Effingham, South Carolina. We brought jobs and opportunity here. That's an expression of leadership. In the late '90s, I was president of a software company that was a real pioneer in creating what we all now sort of ubiquitously know as social media software. So, over the last 30 years, I've been involved in business. I've been, Charleston Business Magazine named me one of the 50 most influential business leaders in the region. The city of Charleston named a day after me because of my work with the museum. Dickinson College gave me an honorary doctorate degree in public history for my work. So, over the course of my career, I've been in leadership positions and had an opportunity to create, to grow, to make things happen.
And this may be a silly question, Michael, but what does being a businessman have to do with legislative skills?
Well, I think it's about leadership. I think it's about understanding. Some people have said, I don't remember who, maybe back in the '40s, someone said that the business of America is business. And so I think understanding how the economy works, understanding how to create jobs, I think is an important skill set. But I think also, over the course of my career, I have, consistently worked across a number of different sort of aisles, sort of politically, from a religious standpoint, from a race standpoint, from a social class standpoint. I've worked with people of all different kinds and had success doing so. So I think for me, being in business, having an opportunity to do business on 4 continents, having an opportunity to engage with foreign heads of state, all of those things have given me the kind of base of experience that complements I think, just my commitment to people and to building on a lot of the legislative battles that my ancestors who had served in office that they started.
Let me go something that was very controversial over the summer. And obviously, this is a post that you posted on X. It says this: today, I'm calling on President Biden to withdraw from the 2024 White House race and to help guide Democrats' transition to a new nominee ahead of the November election. As we sit here right now, do you regret that?
No, I mean, people come up to me all the time. Someone last night came up to me and said, Michael, I didn't happen to see it the way you did at the time, but you made a call. You were right. The energy that is around the party now, the sense of optimism, the hope that is all around the Democratic Party nationally, that's centered around Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, is profoundly important to moving us forward toward November 5th. And, look, I'm not a politician. And so oftentimes I may act in ways that might not be consistent with a true longstanding politician, but I sort of read the tea leaves as I saw them. I made a difficult call. I stuck with it. And I think that's what leadership is about.
Why not make that difficult decision privately?
Well, because the whole point of what I'm doing is I'm endeavoring to engage with the public, with the people of the First Congressional District. I think they need to know who I am and what I believe in and how I stand on various issues. The point of my original statement, that got lost, but I was this was at a time. This was early July, at a time when people were just coming out, pundits and in the media and the like, and basically dismissing President Biden and his potential role in winning in November. And what I said is that I just happened regretfully to agree with I think the 60% of Democrats at the time where they believed, but I thought that it was important, and this was the point, important that we, leverage President Biden, that he needed to be a part of the process, that we needed him to bring along his Biden Democrats that would complement Vice President Harris and, her relationship and engagement around women and around young people, and that together that would be the most effective way to win in November, acknowledging that the stakes are just extraordinarily high, that in many ways democracy itself is on the ballot on November 5th.
And I read most of the post, and I wish I could, recite it all, but due to time constraints, I can't. But let me ask you this: by posting this and by obviously speaking about this publicly, did you drive away some of those Biden Democrats who would actually vote for you in the first congressional district race?
I think early on, I think it caught people by surprise, and I think it upset people. But I think as we've seen just the difference in the energy and the optimism in the party nationally, as we've seen, the fact that Kamala Harris is leading in most every poll, the fact that, Democrats have a real opportunity to take the White House. And by the way, with all that energy to impact down ballot races like mine, I think people, like I mentioned, the guy came to me last night, people are acknowledging that it was a difficult call. I may not have seen it in the way that you saw it, but now in reflection on where we are now as a party, as a nation, you were right, Michael. And I think that's the point. So if I had been quiet with that, if I had, in some small way, maybe my statement was a brick in the foundation of where we are as a party, and hopefully a victory for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on November 5th.
But do you believe your statement proves that you're not actually ready for Congress?
I think if one is tasked in Congress with being a leader, with making the best decision for your district, for the people you represent, I think it proves that, I am uniquely able to do that. One of the criticisms that was originally thrown my way was that I was effectively a pawn of the Biden administration. Nobody can say that. I'm an independent person. I made a decision. I have extraordinary respect for President Biden. He has had among the most productive first terms of any president in my lifetime, and deserves enormous praise. But again, with the stakes as high as I believe most of us understand, I mean, let's just really quickly for a moment, former President Trump has contemplated effectively suspending the Constitution. So not to dive down that rabbit hole, but the stakes are high, and I think Democrats are in a far better position now to win in November and to prevent sort of those infringements on democracy than we certainly were before we've got the new nominee.
But to be fair, Michael, the former president says, hey, he has no connection to Project 2025, which you stated in a couple of your posts. And do you actually have any evidence that he wants to suspend the Constitution?
He has said that, first of all, let's talk about Project 2025. You can say it. It's clear to me why he wants to distance himself from that. I think anybody in his position would want to distance himself from that. But it's his people, his cronies, have been a part of the process of creating that document. The Heritage Foundation has said that they've created that as a blueprint, essentially, to enmesh MAGA policy and philosophy into government. And so, yeah, I think I think no one is surprised that former President Trump will say or do just about anything at any moment to solve whatever issue that's in front of him. So I think that's the first thing.
But do you actually have any evidence that he says that? You said his cronies, but is he saying this?
Yes, he has. There was a recording that came out publicly, I think, over the last couple of days, where he was, as I understand it, that he was praising the Heritage Foundation in their creation of the document. And so, yes, I believe that information has been established.
Now, in the ABC News debate, he basically says there are some ideas that are good or some bad. He hasn't looked at the document purposely. So how could you correlate him to that?
Because of the creation of the document, as I said, was created by a group of people that included former Trump, folks from Trump's team, with the express purpose of creating a playbook for the next Trump term that would establish MAGA and Trumpism as effectively the law of the land. It contemplates politicizing the government in a way that that Trump will go after people who he'll have retribution against, people who he sees in some way as his enemies, that will make career non-political roles in the government all of a sudden political. He'll fire people and install people loyal to him. He has talked about coming in. One sec, he has talked about coming in and being a dictator from day one. He has even said publicly that if you vote for me this one last time, you'll never have to vote again. I don't understand a political context in which anybody running for any office in our American democracy could say something like that. So it's very concerning.
Well, let me ask you this then. If you were to be elected to Congress, how would you actually stop that from happening?
I think do my darndest to get Democrats elected. Let's see. So I think down ballot races, particularly congressional races, are exceedingly important. If former President Trump wins, we're going to need a Democratic Congress to offer a counterbalance to Trump, to hold him accountable and to prevent a lot of the anti-democratic things from proceeding. But even if he doesn't win, if President Harris wins, a Democratic Congress, a Democratic House and Senate will be required to be able to move forward her agenda. So I think either way, having Democrats in office is the way to go. And I would even say on a state level, we need to elect more Democrats to the General Assembly. My district, the 1st Congressional District, was gerrymandered. 30,000 black voters were, taken out of the district to make it a safer Republican district. Now, we can win without that. We've got to, get the yield up. But if there were more Democrats in the General Assembly, they couldn't do that. They couldn't, inappropriately, pull out these voters to try to make it safer for them on the right.
Well, have you had a conversation with Congressman Clyburn, who allegedly helped with that gerrymandering?
Yeah, I don't believe that that's the case. Congressman Clyburn is a patriot. He is a hero, and he is someone who has fought for his entire career to move the state, to move this country forward. And so I don't think he has done anything wrong.
First congressional Democratic candidate, Michael B. Moore, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Always great to chop it up with you, Quintin.
Thank you so much.